Hi, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Gene and Dave Show.
Yes, and today we are talking about law. But before you go turning your channels, you will want to see this episode. I know that law can get to be boring, but today we're talking about law and how it affects people with disabilities. You know, Gene, as I meet people, other folks that have disabilities, I get questions all the time about, oh man, what do you do if you can't get into a restaurant? Or, if a restaurant, if you can't get into the bathroom, or what is this new Medicaid waiver program? Um, what are my rights as a citizen with a disability to be able to go into a public building or a public park? Um,
It's either access or benefits. Everyone's got questions on it.
all those questions, and today we are going to try to tackle all of those on this episode. So stay tuned. Probably one of the biggest questions is access.
Yeah, and when we talk access, generally we're talking the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Right, the ADA, as it's better known. And if you've ever looked at the ADA, the laws, and what you need to know about it, it's a confusing mess.
Oh
Um,
yeah, not just for us, but for a lot of attorneys out there too.
for attorneys and contractors that are actually building buildings, everybody involved in trying to implement the ADA, it can get pretty confusing. But we talked to a friend of yours.
That's right,
And
Wendy Wilkinson.
we talked to Wendy, and she is with the ADA of.
The ADA the Southwest ADA Center.
Yeah, also known as DBTAC.
Exactly, the Disability Business and Technical Assistance Center. And if anyone knows the law, she knows the law. And so you're going to want to stay tuned for this. Let's see what Wendy has to say on this access stuff. Wendy, what exactly is the DIPTAC Southwest ADA Center?
All right, it is quite a mouthful in terms of the DBTAC Southwest ADA Center stands for Disabilities and Business Technical Assistance Center on the Americans with Disabilities Act. We receive funding from NIDER, a program of the Department of Education, and we were funded about 20 years ago. After the ADA was passed, there was a recognition that people would need information on disability and how to actually implement the ADA, because unlike other civil rights laws, it was not enough to say you can enter this business, you can come here, because buildings needed to be changed. We needed ramps to get in terms of employment. Employers had to figure out how to do different things differently in order to accommodate people with disabilities. So what we were funded to do is provide training, technical assistance, and resources on the ADA and other disability-related laws. And we do that through providing technical assistance through an 800 number, in person, going out and providing training to anybody with rights or responsibilities under the ADA. There continues to be a huge demand, I think, because people still don't understand all the implications of disability and actually what non-discrimination against people with disabilities means.
What services do you actually provide regarding the ADA?
We provide in-person training. We also provide training through webinars. We broadcast podcasts on a regular basis. We also have a video cast in American Sign Language, which actually appear on YouTube. We develop resources tailored to different groups and audiences. Again, just provide technical assistance over the phone to a variety of entities, both with rights and responsibilities. So if someone calls, we'll explain to them what their rights and employment are, how they might access a business, what the tax incentives for a business are. We do a lot of things. We're continually growing in terms of the dynamism of the ADA and just using technology as much as we can to promote proactive compliance with the ADA.
It sounds like you've got a great web presence. How do people find you on the internet?
Yes, we do have a great web presence, and you can find us on the internet at www.swdbtac.edu. And on that website, we have a lot of different resources. We have hundreds of publications that people can get to. They have questions. We also have a resource that we're proud of that has been developed here called the Disability Law index where you can actually go to a particular regulation, look at the statute, look at the regulation, and look at the case law that's interpreted it. So you can see what's been happening with that particular piece and what the latest court cases are or settlement agreements are about that particular regulation. We also have a whole archive of e-bulletins that we've written, and e-bulletins are pieces that we've written for particular issues. For example, service animals under the ADA, that's been one of our most popular e-bulletins. And also under other topics related to disability. Because of the advent with IE, Katrina, and Rita, we've been involved in training entities on disaster preparedness and recovery and how you make sure you accommodate people with disabilities. We do a lot of training on accommodating people in post-secondary, so that would include addressing 504. We also address housing issues under the Fair Housing Act. So as you can see, our website, we've really populated it with a rich repository of information on all kinds of laws. We have developed fact sheets that are specific to different areas of the law because there's a huge body of disability-related laws, and we're here to try to translate those laws, develop resources so that people can understand their rights and be able to understand how to request an accommodation, and employers also need to know how to respond to accommodation requests. So we do have a lot of rich information, and not just on the ADA.
Now, is there a fee for any of your service?
For the most part, the calls are free. A lot of our trainings are free. However, from time to time, we do request fees just to cover our expected staff if we're asked to travel and come and do some trainings. But it's on a sliding scale. Our intention is we want to get out there and get the word out about the ADA and disability to the extent that we can. And just now and then, in order to recoup those costs, we do sometimes charge for different trainings. But anything that we do make does go back into the program so that we can do further training, develop new webinars, resources, all to promote the ADA.
I think you've said it before, but it bears repeating. We don't have to be an attorney to call. We don't have to be an organization. Just anybody with a disability or not that has a question on the ADA or perhaps related laws can call your office at 1-800-949-4232 and speak with someone there regarding one of these laws for no charge.
Absolutely. And as I said, we love your show, and you guys are doing a great job.
You know, Dave, I'm glad we had Wendy's view from the public side here, but in the private sector, there's some laws that...
Yeah, and Wendy sounds really accessible too.
Yeah.
Just being able to give them a call and talk to them about problems that you have, or man, I looked through their website and there's just a ton of information out there, including an old blog from Gene. See if you can find that.
Yeah, they got their videos captioned. They've got them in. They've got a sign language interpreter on some of their videos in Spanish. So if you can't access their materials, something wrong.
All the time, or that I get all the time, Gene, is about how do I get benefits? Maybe I wasn't disabled yesterday, but I am today. How in the world do I get help for this equipment that's so expensive? Or I'm disabled now and I can no longer work. There's Medicaid, Medicare, SSI, SSDI. How do I make sense of all of it, and what do I need to do to protect myself?
Yeah, a lot of good questions, and you're going to want to make sure you get the right answers because it can have such an impact on your daily life, your income, your benefits. So we went to Clyde Farrell, who's an expert in elder law here in Austin, and Clyde is also one of those people that's really accessible, a real great guy to talk to, and I actually went through Clyde to get my will drawn up in a medical power of attorney because I don't want there to be any questions when it's my time to go. So
we had several questions for him, and man, I think we were trying as hard as we could to stump the guy, and he had a direct answer for everything. So he's definitely a wealth of knowledge, and he's trying to train other lawyers, young lawyers in his corporation to be able to take over this knowledge. And
Yeah, so if you call up Clyde and he refers you to another lawyer, it's because it's someone that he's providing some tutelage for, and he's not pushing you off, but yeah, like you say, he's bringing up some young folks.
But yeah, he's definitely got a wealth of information, so I recommend you call him. But let's watch this first and see what you think.
We're here today with Clyde Farrell, who is an attorney in elder law. Clyde, what exactly is elder law?
Elder law involves traditional estate planning and probate for older folks, but added to it is dealing with public benefits. Essentially, a lot of what we do is what I call passing the means test. When people need Medicaid or SSI or other means-tested benefits, we help them pass the means test.
You know, a lot of us folks with disabilities have questions on Medicare. What is the buy-in program? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we have a new Medicaid buy-in program. It's only been around for about 3 years, and the last time I checked, there were only 80 or so people on the program. But I think that's a shame, because I've seen a lot of cases where people could really benefit from it.
80 in the whole state of Texas?
That's right.
Wow, that means test must be pretty tough. I should have studied harder. So why are there so few? Do you know the answer to that?
I think it's largely because the state doesn't publicize it very much. But people need to know some basic facts about it. For example, if you're married, a spouse's assets and income don't count.
Okay.
And you can transfer all your assets over to your spouse without penalty, because another thing to know about it is there is no transfer penalty. You can transfer your assets to your best buddy or your son or daughter or a parent, and there's still no penalty for it.
Now, you mentioned something about a waiting list.
We were talking about a waiting list concerning waiver programs.
Oh, okay.
But there's not a waiting list on the Medicaid buy-in because there are so few people applying for it.
Okay.
Now, also, it's good to know about buy-in that there's a $5,000 resource or asset limit, but unlike regular Medicaid and SSI, retirement accounts don't count. So you could have $100,000 in an IRA or any other tax-deferred retirement accounts and still get Medicaid buy-in.
So what does the Medicaid buy-in do for someone like myself?
Yeah.
Now, the main thing it does is it makes Medicaid available to people who otherwise would be eligible, who can't qualify for SSI because they have too much income. For example, people who have Social Security disability benefits but haven't yet hit that 29-month period when they get on Medicare are in a terrible bind in many cases if they don't already have health insurance or if they can't afford health insurance. Medicaid buy-in can help them get through that period. Now, Medicaid buy-in does have a premium for some people. If you have more than $674 a month in unearned income, the amount above that has to be paid as a premium, but you never have to pay more than $500 a month as a premium.
You know, it sounds like all of this can get a little bit complicated, but we're going to find out before this broadcast is over how we get in contact with you. So if we have folks out there that want to learn more, they can directly from you. Let's say I'm working and I want to continue to work, don't want to lose my health benefits. What are the rights of persons with disabilities who are working?
The best resource I found on that recently is this book I have right here, Benefits Management for Working People with Disabilities. Let me say the title again so you can get enough of that to Google it, because I'm not sure exactly how. I bought it from the publisher, which is Empire Justice Center. You might Google that. But the title again is Benefits Management for Working People with Disabilities. This has been around for about 10 years. I have an earlier edition, and this 2009 edition is really good.
Does it explain it easy enough for folks like me to understand?
It does, Jane. You're a pretty smart guy.
Thanks, Clyde. All right. David, do you have a question about Medicaid beneficiary needs?
So what if a Medicaid beneficiary needs Medicaid in order to work?
Yeah, we've seen this, for example, some group home residents can work and make a pretty good income if they have the support of that group home. And what's called the 1619B program comes into effect there. That's named after a section of the Social Security Act. And under that, people can make as much as $29,152 a year and still get Medicaid benefits, which pays the group home. And the idea there is that if you need the Medicaid in order to work, then Medicaid will allow you to, it will pay as long as your income doesn't exceed $29,152 a month.
Now this is 2010.
I mean a year. I'm sorry. It's $2,429.33 a month. Yeah.
Right. Now this is the year 2010. The numbers you just gave us will change next year or every year. Is it safe to say?
Ordinarily, they change every year. They haven't changed this year because we didn't have inflation this year, supposedly.
Well, it's news to me and Dave. All right, well, let's talk about SSI for a moment. If SSI benefits are reduced by a third because someone's providing food and shelter, whether it be a parent or someone like that, is there any way around that?
Yes, sometimes we can get around that with what's called a business arrangement. If you pay the actual cost of your food and shelter, usually to someone you're living with, you pay a pro rata share of utilities, food, maintenance, all of that, then you don't have any deduction from your SSI benefit. And knowing that can be very valuable.
Oh, sure, to keep the money in the family.
Yeah, now speaking of trust, I've heard that if you have the SSI trust, that you can't use those funds to purchase like living expenses, for example.
Well, that's sometimes said, and there are a few trusts that are actually written that way, but the rules have changed on that over the years so that you actually can use, if you're on SSI or Medicaid, you actually can use trust funds for that if you're willing to accept that 1/3 reduction. Now, for most people with trusts, that's a very good deal. If the trust is large enough to pay food and shelter, then a 1/3 reduction in SSI benefits isn't a big deal. That's $245 a month. And usually that's the best thing to do. But there are some people who have a relatively small trust that isn't really large enough to pay all the food and shelter. And for some of those people, it's still better to use the trust just for things other than food and shelter.
But you can do it. That's good to know.
That's right. That's right. Depends on your situation.
All right, I've got one for you, Clyde. I obviously have a serious disability. I'm a quadriplegic, but I can make pretty good income. Well, I suppose I could if I was ambitious. But how can I get help paying for attendance if I had a pretty good income?
Well, there are two main things to know about that. The first thing to know is that you have if you make more than $1,000 a month, Social Security generally assumes you're able to engage in substantial gainful employment and you lose your benefits. But they deduct from what they count for that purposes what's called impairment-related work expenses, or IRWE, IRWE. So you could have, let's say, $4,000 a month in income, and if you're paying $3,000 a month for attendant care or some other impairment-related work expense, you're not going to be threatened with loss of Social Security disability. And another benefit that can help with that is one of the waiver programs, community-based alternatives, or the class program. Once you get up on the waiting list on those programs, they can help pay for care that your work income might not be sufficient to pay. So you really can have a pretty good income if you can find a way to get it and still pay for attendant care if you use all those resources.
Well, let's talk about something perhaps a little bit more here and now. Let's say that I live with my parents and they pay for private insurance for me. I also have Medicaid. Would there be any reason for my parents to keep paying for private health insurance?
Yes, there is. There's the Health Insurance Premium Payment Program, or HIP, will actually pay the entire premium for the entire family. Everybody in the household is covered by that private health insurance if that's cost effective for the Medicaid program. I've seen a number of cases on that. In every case it was cost effective for them. So that can save hundreds, even thousands of dollars a month in health insurance premiums.
Wow. What legal instruments should people with disabilities consider having, or should they, even rather more than consider, should they really have?
People with disabilities need the same legal documents as anyone else, really. There's no difference there. Everyone needs a will or a living trust. And that's even if you presently don't think you have anything. Anyone could inherit something or win a lawsuit or win the lottery, you never know. And having that can be really valuable for whoever may come after you. You need financial and medical powers of attorney. I think that's really more important for everyone, whether you have a disability or not. We all potentially may have a disability. I tell all my clients when I'm talking about this, anyone can get hit on the head any old day and need someone to take care of them. And this is your chance to avoid a guardianship by having the opportunity to personally appoint someone to handle your financial and medical decisions if you're unable to do that at some time in the future. And most people want to sign a living will or directive to physicians to say whether or not you want life support in the event of a terminal condition or an irreversible condition. Now, one more thing that especially applies to people with disabilities, and that is the will or trust that your parents have, or grandparents, or children, or whoever you might get support from, or might get an inheritance from. If they have a trust in their will or living trust, then that protects your Medicaid benefits or other means-tested benefits, and that money doesn't have to go to the Medicaid program after your lifetime. But if you inherit from someone else, the first disadvantage is you're going to have to scramble around and get a trust set up. We can always set up a trust of some kind, but unless it's a very small amount, you're going to need a trust. And the second problem is that trust is going to have a payback to Medicaid clause. You can avoid that payback to Medicaid clause, or your parent or whoever is giving you something after their lifetime can avoid it by contributing to a trust directly themselves.
It sounds like it get a bit complicated, but the bottom line is, if you think you could inherit some money or somehow come into a large amount of money, to prevent problems, go ahead and see someone like yourself that's not only an attorney but a certified financial planner that can help them set up a trust, or their parents set up a trust, so that when the time does come, money's transferred, you don't lose your benefits.
Sure, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Every will I draft has a trust. It says if anyone who's getting means-tested benefits or could get means-tested benefits receives anything under this, it goes into a trust. And it's very simple language. So this doesn't have to be a big production.
Well, Clyde, this has all been very informative, and we have Clyde's web address here in case you want to look him up. Dave, do we have any other questions for Clyde other than I guess, you know, at one time I used to think that if you don't have much assets at all, you don't need a will, but you know, I look around my apartment, I've got all sorts of equipment and such, and I would like to see it go to the right places, whether it's nonprofits or, you know, when I die or whatever, but I can see the importance of having a will, no matter what you've got. And certainly medical powers of attorney, all that.
Absolutely. So what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My phone number is 323-2977.
Okay, just pick up the phone and give you a call, huh?
That's right. We sound like an infomercial.
Good. Well, thanks again, Clyde. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That was great for Clyde to give us his time like that, because I mean, the guy's really an expert, but he's friendly and everything.
Man, he is. Every question we answered him, tried to stump him, he definitely had a direct answer for all of them. And I know that if I'm going to need an attorney to draft a will, or I'm going to check into that Medicaid waiver program myself, Clyde's going to be the guy that I call, because he seems to know all the ins and outs of the systems. And boy, it's hard to find somebody with that amount of knowledge.
Yeah, and you don't want to be guessing about benefits and income and the laws and such. It's something you really want to talk to an expert about. So, I encourage everyone out there, make sure you got your will in order, your medical power of attorney, all that sort of stuff. I know I did, and I feel better about that. So look up either Clyde or someone like that, get that taken care of.
It can definitely be confusing. Another thing that's confusing, we talked about the ADA earlier.
Oh, yeah.
How confusing it was, and how helpful Wendy and her website and her organization is. But locally here in Austin, who handles the ADA and makes sure that the city of Austin is accessible?
Well, that would be our friend Dolores Gonzalez.
That's right. We got to sit down with her. She is a great person and definitely a true friend. She loves actual lives. We see her at almost every show. She's at least at one show, but a lot of times she's at multiple shows. Every time a performance is being put on, she's a true fan of actual lives. And I know that she's also a supporter of nobility and just everything that's accessible for the city. Dolores is always there in that picture because she truly loves her job and wants to make sure that the city of Austin is accessible.
Exactly. Let's chat with Dolores and see what we can find out. Good morning, Dolores.
Hi, Gene.
Thanks for having us here today.
Sure.
Dolores, you're the City of Austin ADA coordinator, is that right?
That's right.
And we're here outside your beautiful offices here on 505 Barton Springs Road. Dolores, what do you do for the city as a coordinator, ADA coordinator?
Well, my job is to make sure that all of the programs and services and facilities of the city of Austin are accessible to people with disabilities. So I do a variety of things. Just to give you a little bit of background, the law became effective in January of 1992, and I took my position at that time. I was actually appointed in late 1991. So what we had done is we assigned ADA coordinators in all of the departments, which is about 25 different departments. What we thought, I would be familiar with ADA, they're familiar with their services, so together, we would make sure that in each department, they were in compliance with their services.
Can you give us an example of what you mean?
Well, let's say, for example, in one of our Health and Human Services buildings, maybe they have stairs and no elevator, and somebody wants to go and conduct business in there. Rather than to put an elevator in there and make it completely accessible and spend $100,000 on an elevator, then what you do is if somebody comes in that needs that access, you move the program meeting, whatever the circumstance of service that the person needs, either to the ground floor conference room, or you go on site to their home to provide the service. So it's really about providing the service, not necessarily whether the building is accessible.
Would that also be an example, say, of reasonable accommodations?
Well, reasonable accommodations are for employees to do their job. So if somebody, one of our employees is hired and needs a certain accommodation, maybe like a piece of software that they need to use on the computer so they can enlarge print, then we can provide that. That would be a reasonable accommodation.
Now, at what point is that determined? Can you ask someone in an interview what kind of reasonable accommodations will you need, or what kind of disability you have?
No, you don't really want to do that. That's actually illegal to do that. But what you want to do is you can say, this is what the job is. Can you tell me how you would do it? If somebody comes in and uses a wheelchair in essence, that's self-disclosure. And so it opens up the dialogue to talk about it, but you don't really want to ask about the disability, you really want to know about the job. Can the person do the job? How would they do this particular function? And you can just ask the person. At the end of it, you can say, is there anything that we can do that would allow you to do the job? Is there any kind of, you can ask about reasonable accommodation. And it's, the person can, at that time can tell you.
If someone has an issue with access in the city, how do they go about resolving that issue? Let's say it's first of all it's physical access.
Well, we have a 311 number, sort of like a 911. The 311 is like non-emergency numbers. And so the operators there have some basic information about, like if, say for example, you wanted a curb cut in your neighborhood or to get to your store or something like that, then you can call 311 and there's a direct process whereby they can get this information to the people that do the curb cuts. So they don't necessarily have to go through me. There are some things that are basic. We've been complying with ADA for almost 20 years now. So, some things are kind of basic information now within our system.
So start with 311.
Start with 311.
See where that goes.
Yeah, and if they don't know the answer, even if they call 311, because it's the easiest way to do it, they can always refer to me. Like if the 311 operator doesn't have a regular process for that, they will give it to me. And I have a website, I have number, I have email address. I can be reached. I'm reachable.
Austin has been consistently voted in the top 3 accessible cities in the country every year. So I'll give you a pat on the back, Dolores.
It's not just me though. Remember my ADA coordinators.
And we've got a lot of activists too in Austin.
That's true. Oh, absolutely. We wouldn't be here without everybody putting their 2 cents. Absolutely.
So if we continue to work together, we'll become hopefully more accessible and a better Austin for everyone.
Well, I can tell you this, that we have had good support from the top. I'm now on my 4th city manager, 7th mayor, and as we know in the disability community that, it's like 20% of the population has some form of disability. So what's really happened that has kind of been in my favor in a way has been that all of those people have had some link to disability. And so therefore a family member or some knowledge of, some exposure to it for sure, where, it makes it real for them. If whatever I say, they've actually been very supportive from the get-go, and that, that's invaluable. That really is. It allows me to do my job. I came from a advocacy perspective, but now I'm more of a compliance officer than advocate. But at least my heart is in the advocacy, And so it's been very helpful to have that support. Now you say about the accessible, we have had accessible awards. We are named probably in the top 5 for sure. But and even for the size of our city, it's really remarkable. But we're not immune to lawsuits, and we've had our share of lawsuits. And as a result of that, basically, the city doesn't take the approach of how do we get around this, or what's the least amount that we have to do to comply. It's more like, how can we make this right? How can we make this right? And so we always settle, here comes the lawsuits. Our friends from ADAPT have filed several lawsuits. One lawsuit yielded the visitability ordinance, which we're familiar with, where it provides 5 different basic features of accessibility to all the homes that are built.
Right,
It primarily is for publicly built houses, like houses that we build. But we've actually expanded that with some incentives for the private builders to build homes with the visitable. They're not completely accessible, but it's a good start.
They're visitable, so
I do put out a report every year that kind of talks about all of the different things that we do throughout the city, where the new curb cuts are, you know, the new libraries, you know, just anything that's new about accessibility is in this report. I do have it online too, it's on my website, and I'm happy to provide a copy to anybody.
And that web address is?
It's under the cityofaustin.org/ADA.
Very good. We'll make sure that's on the website.
Dolores definitely knows about accessibility.
Doesn't
the thing
she
I
know?
like about her is definitely everybody is her friend. Even the rights activists that come out and call her and hound her every day about the curb cuts in the city and being able to get on the bus. She's definitely a friendly ear that listens to people on all of those, and to be able to call, you know, our friends and adapt her friends as well, just really says a lot about Dolores.
Yeah, she's something else. That's why we like Dolores.
Well, you like Dolores because she does your beads on your hair.
Thank you for noticing. Yeah, she did a great job on my beads. You know, Dave, every episode we like to include a segment of actual lives, which is how you and I got our start on the show. And this show is no different. We're lucky today to have Regina Bly with us, who's going to do her rendition of If I Were Free. Now, this is an old Etta James tune you might recognize, and Etta James was also black, and she also had disability. So I can see how the two relate there, but time to sit back and enjoy Regina singing.
I was 10, tall for my age, athletic with big chubby cheeks and ponytails in my hair. I had just been selected as an all-star on the Little Dribblers basketball team. I remember the crowds and dribbling that ball. It was like a dance. I was free then. I was a little girl in my own world. I would give anything to recapture that moment. But until then, I have to wonder how it feels to be just that free again. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I shouldn't say
Now Regina,
Great song.
yeah, it's a great song, and Regina's very talented. So, I mean, I could listen to that over and over again. But Dave, I did want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about civil rights. You and I have spent our time on the line with ADAPT at protests and such. And civil rights have been part of our life. But you know, I hear all this talk about Rosa Parks, but she was not a civil rights activist. When I think of a civil rights leader, I think of someone that openly embraces the concept of civil rights and with such a passion that other people willingly follow them. But Rosa Parks, the story on hers, what happened was, it was 1955, Montgomery, Alabama. She gets on a bus, and at that time it was a practice for blacks to sit in the back of the bus. They asked her to move or told her to move, and she wouldn't do it. It was not because she was making a protest. She was just so tired. She was so doggone tired. She just refused to
Just
move.
plop down right there in the front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people said, "Oh, you're a civil rights leader." And she said, "No, I don't want to get involved in that. Please leave me alone." But they finally dragged her into it, and well, you know, thankfully she did acquiesce to their wishes. But if you really want to find out what leaders are about, particularly in the civil rights movement, that book you have there, "Let the Trumpet Sound," is about Martin Luther King and the Southern Baptist Leadership Conference and such. You'll find all about leaders in the civil rights movement there.
Gene, it looks like this book is a well read by you, because it looks like it's been there and back a few times. So I can tell this is one that you keep in your back pocket and take with you a lot of different places.
It really is, yeah, and share with our ADAPT friends, because we learn a lot about civil rights by Martin Luther King.
Great, thanks for sharing this.
Sure. There's I remember you doing providing a beat to a young man that was doing some rap, and in an actual lives performance.
It's really too bad that you've lost that clip.
Thanks for reminding our audience. But his father is an attorney, and we spoke with him, and that was Garth Corbett. Yeah, and it's another free resource out there. People, you'll find all this information on our website. Please go to it, and call these people if you have any questions, because they're certainly amenable to it. So let's hear what Garth had to say about Advocacy Incorporated. We're here today with Garth Corbett from Advocacy Incorporated. Garth, can you give us an overview of what Advocacy Incorporated is, what it does, and what it means to folks with disabilities?
Sure. I'm a senior attorney with Advocacy Incorporated. I've worked for Advocacy Incorporated for about 20 years. And what the agency does, what Advocacy Incorporated is about, is it gets its funding from the federal government, and it's pursuant to federal legislation that got passed back in the mid-1970s. And what it does is it provides legal services and assistance, as well as advocacy, for persons with developmental disabilities, intellectual developmental disabilities from the standpoint of related conditions. That could be someone with cerebral palsy, a spina bifida, somebody with an intellectual disability, and someone who is a person with mental illness. And in addition to that, Congress, within the last few years, also incorporated individuals who, what they call, who acquire a disability after the age of 21. They're also covered under the protections of federal law. When the law was originally passed, it was designed for individuals with developmental disabilities, which means you have to have a disability that occurs and has a significant effect on your ability to do certain life activities prior to the age of 21. And over the years, Congress has amended that so that individuals who acquire disabilities after the age of 21 also are covered. And what that enables our agency to do is to assist people who believe that they've been discriminated against, for example, in employment, to utilize our services so that we can represent them either in terms of trying to get a job if they were denied in the application process, or if they already have a job and they want to keep it, in order to get a reasonable accommodation, for example, out of the employer, so that they can continue to do what they're doing, but they need a modification because either they've acquired an additional disability or they've recently become disabled. So it gives us the opportunity to help people in the area of employment. We also do issues related to public transportation. Many people with disabilities, their only means of access in terms of public, or transportation rather, is public transit. And we have been involved in a couple of cases that have tried to make the services that in public bus companies, for example, provide, and transit agencies provide, to be more responsive to persons with disabilities. And for example, that can mean being more flexible in terms of where a person is picked up as it relates to their house, in terms of dropping individuals off, that they try to drop them off as close as they possibly can to the place that the person needs to go, related to allowing attendance on the bus, service animals. We're involved in a whole variety of issues related to public transit. Probably the most important is, as it relates to paratransit, is the ability of people to access paratransit services in a simple, easy way, and can do it within at least 24 hours of when they need to go someplace. That has been an ongoing issue for many of our clients, is that they have a very difficult time accessing public transit in a meaningful way. That is, they might get a ride time, but it's not a time that they need, or if in fact they're lucky enough to get the ride time that they need, the bus doesn't show up at the scheduled time. Either it shows up much too early, or it shows up after the scheduled time, and the individual misses their appointment. So these are, in the area of public transit, these are ongoing issues that we, if we can't resolve informally, sometimes it will result in litigation. The other area that advocacy is involved and devotes a significant amount of time and resources to is special education issues. That is, for children and young adults who are in the grade school, or elementary, middle school, and high school categories in terms of educational services. Many of our clients are in special ed. That is, that they're not, for the most part, attending regular classes. They get mainstreamed for, and mainstream is a term where they are actually able to participate with individual students who don't have disabilities. But their experience is generally limited to things like lunch, sometimes PE, certainly assembly. But what we try to do is get these particular individuals included in regular classes with assistance, so that they are mainstreamed to the maximum extent that we're able to do in terms of accommodating them in a regular classroom situation. Also involves getting additional services for them. It can mean a wheelchair, it can mean a speech generating device, it can mean a note taker, it can mean an aid, it can mean a whole variety of things, and we devote and modifying the curriculum so that the student, if they have a particular disability, let's say dyslexia, where they have problems reading written material, well, one of the things that the school would have to do would be to provide someone who could, for example, read a test question to them or read class material to them. Many of the clients that we represent need additional time in test taking, or need to take tests in a different way. Instead of perhaps an essay format, they might, because of their disability, ask that a modification be made to the curriculum when they could do it in a multiple choice format. There are a whole host of modifications, as long as they can be justified by treating professionals, and oftentimes are considered best practices anyway as it relates to a person with disabilities, that we ask the school, the high school, to make a modification accordingly. One thing in the area of education, that I want to be clear on, is that special ed, which is in special education, it's under the Individuals with Disability Education Act. That's a separate federal law from, for example, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which students who have disabilities also are able to access in terms of getting accommodations to school services. The IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act law, is much more comprehensive and provides a much more array of protections in terms of due process. If you're a student with a significant disability and you fall under the protections of that law. Under 504, you do have many of the same protections in terms of the school is supposed to ensure that a person receives services in the least restrictive environment. But oftentimes individuals who qualify for 504 don't have an intellectual deficit. They have a physical disability that limits their ability to do things in the same way that other enabled students in class are able to do things. So the best example is if you had someone, let's say, who had a significant visual impairment, a modification might be for certain written materials to be put in Braille form. That would be an obligation, for example, a school or a junior college or a university, or an employer for that matter, would have to consider doing, because in most cases putting materials that are available to people who don't have disabilities in a format that a person with a disability can use is something the law generally requires. The other big area that Advocacy Incorporated is involved in has to do with institutional services. That is, people who are in what they used to call state schools, now the state-supported living centers for persons with intellectual disabilities, as well as nursing homes. We try to ensure that individuals in institutional settings have the opportunity to move out and move into their least restrictive environments. We try to get community placements for them through what they call Medicaid waiver programs as often as we can. The other medicated area related that we do quite a bit of work in is people who are getting Medicaid services. For example, let's say an individual in a nursing home needs a power wheelchair, and they apply for a power wheelchair, and Medicaid, the state Medicaid agency, were to say no, or the nursing home didn't enable the person to apply, didn't ensure that the occupational therapist came to the nursing home to do the evaluation so that the paperwork could be done to ensure the person gets the wheelchair in the event they were found eligible for it. What we have done over the last 8 or 9 years is try to expand services to people with intellectual and physical disabilities in institutions. So in the wheelchair example, Texas, up until about a year ago, did not cover power wheelchairs for persons in institutions, in particular nursing facilities, but now they do. So, and that's due to the advocacy of Advocacy Incorporated, as well as other advocacy agencies like the Southern Disability Law Center is another advocacy organization that advocates and works on behalf of persons with disabilities. And because of advocacy, people are able now to access additional Medicaid services, power wheelchair being one example, speech generating devices is another, that in the past they weren't able to do. So one of our mandates and one of our priorities is to ensure that people in institutions get access to those services that they're entitled to under Medicaid, of course, provided they're Medicaid eligible. The other Medicaid-related issue that we do quite a bit of work in relates to children who have significant physical disabilities and are aging out of what they call the EPSDT program, which is the Children's Medicaid program. Under Children's Medicaid, in any state in the union, you can get just about any service, any medical service a child under the age of 21 needs. When they become an adult, the array of services goes down quite dramatically.
We want to thank all our guests, and before we go to Dave, I wanted to mention that also on our website we have a book called Speak Out. This was done by the Information Technology Technical Assistance and Training Center, I believe in Georgia. This was done years ago. They have the copyright, but they said, please share it with people. They're no longer in business. They're no longer funded, but the book has information on how to make complaints. It has information about the Rehab Act, Communications Act, ADA. It's all helpful stuff, so please take a look at it. Well, amigo, it's been a good show.
It has. Man, and I'm tired. That's a lot of information to soak in. So if you've missed anything, please go to the website. The episode is on the website, as well as all the information that we talked about in text formats with links and phone numbers, and anybody that you wanted to see or talk to. Please feel free to go to the website, and also always remember to tell them that the Dave and Gene show sent you.
That was Gene and Dave's show.
Oh, did
Well,
I messed that up again?
That's okay. We'll fix that in post-production. So long, folks.
Thanks for watching.
You think it's too long?
Oh, no, not at all. What, are you kidding me? No, it's just right.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, no problem.
This'll work good.